Asteroid of fear.
Hey, this is Hunter from the Everything's Connected podcast. Are you feeling drained? If you're searching for ways to manage stress and find a little more peace, the Podcast Connection Network is here for you. We've got amazing shows on mental health, mindfulness, and all kinds of ways to live a happier, healthier life. Check out the link in the episode's description.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And on today's episode, I have Helen Sernett, and we're going to talk all things sleep, which I'm super excited about because many of you know that I am a poor sleeper. I just don't sleep enough, or I sleep odd hours, and I'm sure many of you have this same issue. So I'm super excited to have Helen with us today and learn all about sleep and what we can do to improve it individually together because yeah, we'll be a better world if we're all rested, I think. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. I like to ask, like, how'd you sleep last night? Like, did you sleep last night? How you
Ah,
doing?
I I did sleep last night. I actually slept better than normal, I think, even though I'm still a little groggy somewhat. Few nights have been great, and that's one of those things why I'm glad to have you on is because I go through these bouts of where I can have these little streaks of good sleep, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere I'll have it disrupted. Maybe whatever I'm attempting to take for sleep, like some Ollie sleep gummies, won't work, or they work 3 or 4 hours later. And then I'm back on this wonky schedule. But yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later. But let's start off by getting a little bit of your background and what led you here. Like, why? We have a lot of guests on who they come from these corporate careers and they embark on a different kind of entrepreneurial journey for whatever reason. And there's usually a catalyst, something that made them say, this is more important than this other stuff I was doing once, be it a corporate
Yeah.
job, computer programming, whatever it is. But yeah, give us a little bit about that background and what was the catalyst of putting you into this space and wanting to share it with others.
Yeah, so I host a sleep podcast where I read lists to help people fall asleep. And I had a very successful 20-year career in fundraising for nonprofit organizations. I've raised over $50 million for nonprofit work, missions from healthcare to children's wellness to international development stuff. So I've I was kind of doing the career that I feel like a lot of people leave the corporate career to do. And I was like, yeah, this is great. And then I burnt out on that career. I mean, I think it's interesting because it's like, I wish I could be like, and this was the exact moment. But I think there was a long string of things that led up to this point where I could no longer function in my work. So I was not sleeping well, which was a big deal. I had developed some really terrible insomnia where there were, 1 or 2 nights a week where I just didn't sleep at all. And
Mhm.
then like many nights where like I finally closed my eyes and went to sleep at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. and I had a 6 a.m. wake up call. So I wasn't getting the sleep that I needed. And that was helping the spiral go down faster and faster on the burnout. And the burnout led to like the symptoms of my burnout were like a lot of depression and anxiety. I reached a point where I don't know, like I think everyone has things in their daily life that are just like things that they like to do that are like fun for them that they enjoy doing, whether it's your more, first sip of morning coffee or whatever. But for me, I really loved going to the grocery store. I'm a huge fan of cooking. I love
Mhm.
making new dishes and flavors and trying new things out. And I love going to the grocery store. At least I did. And that is normally a fun trip. Like it's a whole thing. I plan it. I plan what I'm gonna get. I like go to the store. I look at the specials. I just really love being in a grocery store. It's my happy place. It's not everybody's happy place, but it's my happy place.
It's
And I
mine.
showed up one day in the grocery store, looked around and had a complete like anxiety attack. I don't know how else to say it. Like the whole world was closing in on me and I could not function in this space that I'm normally quite adept at handling and doing and enjoy handling and running my weekly grocery run. And so that was a moment where I was like, all right, well, life's spiraling out of control and I better figure out how to do something. So in working with the therapist and my physician and whatnot, I took a leave of absence from work and started trying to regain control of my health. And it really didn't have much impact until I was able to figure out sleep. So that's what led me here.
That's awesome. And, one
Yeah.
of the things I really kind of appreciated, there was something you said that really stuck out to me, and that was my symptoms of burnout were this. Because
Yeah.
I was a healthcare manager, I'm very attuned to fundraising for nonprofits and whatnot. And it's one of those things where we talk about physician burnout and associate burnout and whatnot. And kind of like you say, I think, in these kinds of jobs, we're doing something that's good for others and we get a sense of fulfillment from that, but trapped in every side inside every kind of corporate environment and structure, there's shorthandedness, there's expectations, there's growth, all these things of wanting to outperform the previous year. And so I agree that there's not, because I did healthcare for 12 years, and is there one point that you could kind of pinpoint? Probably not. It's a factor of many different things. And like you said, you start showing up with symptoms of what we call burnout. We think that burnout, I think, is the symptom, is kind of what some of the executive people preach when we approach physicians about burnout. Tell us about burnout. I don't think we necessarily talk about, hey, burnout is the thing, the illness and symptoms, depression, these little things that you could work on, anxiety, and how those impact sleep and rest. Because
Yeah.
especially in healthcare, we're all about productivity. So you'll get people, and we used to go to these big leadership seminars and they would recognize physicians for their capabilities to complete charts and do work. And they would show these graphs of tracking when, let's say, your electronic medical record thing was being used outside of the office, and seeing physicians that are up till 1 or 2 in the morning, or seeing that curvature on the graph where it's 4 or 5 a.m., it's active, and then they work all day, they're charting, and
Yes.
then they come home and, there might be like a small break, but then there's a good 3 or 4 hour window that you see those spikes go back up where they're back there charting. So, if they're getting, let's say, 5 to 7 hours of sleep a night, they're probably at least 14, 15 hours in front of a computer on a chart
It's
outside.
not sustainable. It like
Right.
that idea that the push in any sort of environment to always surpass the prior year, and that will be an infinite there's an infinite capacity for growth without necessarily appropriately resourcing that growth.
Hmm.
It was a huge problem in fundraising, and I know we see it throughout healthcare. It's terrible where there's a lot of, okay, well, we're gonna put a big push on, new hires. We'll hire new people. Like, finally, we're gonna hire new people. And you're like, yes, we're hiring new people. And they're like, all right, we're gonna hire all new frontline fundraisers in my case. So this is all the people that are doing the face-to-face work. And each one is expected to have infinite, like all this huge capacity, and it's gonna increase our revenue and yay, yay. And there's no increase in the support structure to help that. So like in the military, they call it tooth to tail, right? So for every soldier that's on the front line, there's this whole body of resources, people who are making sure that that soldier on the front line has everything that they need. And for some reason in fundraising, especially, but also in healthcare, we don't support that. We don't the executives are like, oh, well, if I just hire more frontline workers, there won't be that support. And that really is the system in which burnout becomes so prevalent, where you have to be charting for 14 hours. Because if you're asking physicians to see patients every 10 minutes during a 8-hour shift, and then they're having to chart that, and you can't see a patient and chart a patient's
Mm-mm.
care in a in a 10-minute window. Like
Even
that
15 is
feels,
tough.
yeah, 10-15 minutes impossible. I mean, and we've all been in the room where we're trying to like explain these really personal concepts to a physician, and they're like, so I'm gonna write that as this, and like they're trying to do their jobs in both aspects of their jobs at the same time, and it doesn't work. And I
No.
feel like we know inherently that it doesn't work, but for some reason, because we have the types of high performing individuals in these spaces who are able to dip into that well of resources that they have inside themselves and give 110% more often than maybe an average person would, or have just created that, and then all of a sudden they wake up one day and they're depleted, as I
But yeah,
was,
you
and it
know,
was, yeah.
the weird thing is when you said that, the first thought that came to my mind though is that, yes, you have a lot of these type A personalities. I'm that kind of person, and they will give you
Yes.
more and more and more and more. It's almost like they know you have that reserve, that well that you'll dip into to perform because that's who you are.
Mhm.
But then it's almost like it's exploited. And
Uh-huh.
then when you said, well, there's this group of support people that ensure the frontline people have all the tools they need to do their job. And I would always say, when I started off as a senior clerk in the emergency room, that was my job, was making sure everybody had everything they needed to do their job and treat the patients all day, all night.
Yeah.
And as a manager, I felt like my job was the same, only I was in charge of more. My budget was
Hmm.
bigger. I had more influence. But, it does, they do kind of exploit that, I think, in a manner. And then all of a sudden, you wake up one day and you've given, 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 given. And, you know, we all know that you can say you want to hire new people, but how do you actually get new people? We were a tobacco-free establishment, and there would be, we would need lab techs, and the lab manager would be like, hey, we've got this many people through the process, and, one of them produced a fake diploma, one of them failed their tobacco screening. So
Oh, wow.
unfortunately, even if you get candidates that can't make it, or candidates that don't stay, or, so I looked for a lead nurse for 2 years once. I didn't have a lead nurse. So, and
And
eventually
that's so critical. That's such a critical
yeah,
role. Like all of these roles are so critical. It's like if you're covering the work of one or two other people per every person, I mean, you're just depleting that reserve. What I find really interesting too with type A personalities, I mean, we're great. We're great. I'm totally one of those people, but I have had to learn that just because I can doesn't mean I should.
yep.
And it's no longer appropriate for me to only focus on my paid work. There's a lot of work in my life that is not paid, and it is good work of living. It is the work of being a good friend, of being a good spouse, of being a great parent, and also of taking care of myself. And
Hmm.
honestly, that unpaid work is more important because nobody else can do it.
Oh.
Even though we've just talked about the shortage of people in a work environment, how difficult it can be to hire. Theoretically, you can hire other people to do the paid work.
Mm-hmm.
No one else is going to be a parent to my kid the way I'm a parent to my kid,
Yeah.
right? So it is absolutely retraining my brain. And I went to prep school. So I was a private school kid, which meant that I was sort of raised in this bubble of a world in the 80s and 90s that really put a huge emphasis on, if you give it your best, you'll be rewarded, and your
Hmm.
best is 110%. Like you always have that reserve to dip into, and so just keep on doing that. And that's such a way to live a short life and die of a heart attack early. It's not a
Well,
good.
what was interesting was I was thinking, I was like, well, yeah, I'm there to make sure the resources are there, but where does sleep fall in that? I can give them, I can order more copy paper, I can order more vaccines and gauze, but how in I
You
don't know.
can't make somebody go to bed.
Right, right. But even how do you foster a culture? They would do things like, okay, facility I worked at had gyms,
Yeah.
and some of our bigger facilities, like the one we call them big boxes, I managed one
Yep.
of those, and they would have a gym, and if you went, you scanned your key card twice a week or 8 times over a month, you would get a credit. So if it was $35 a month, they would credit you $20. So yes, they're promoting a little bit of this. But, the sleep, I tell this story all the time. I go, when I started using medications, when I started working in healthcare, when I had health insurance, when I started going to the doctor, all of a sudden, because I'm down from 9 prescriptions to two, I tell people like, I didn't take any until I started working actually in healthcare, which is bananas. And
Yeah.
and so kind of like the sleep portion of it, when you look at it, you're sitting there going, how do we make sure we foster this culture and try to give our associates time enough to get good rest and whatnot.
I
But
wrote an
y-
I wrote an op like an opinion piece for a publication about that. There was a call from a reporter who was like, "What are some of the best things that best benefits or programs that human resources can offer to their employees to promote wellness?" And I think they were looking for gym memberships and smoking
yeah,
cessation plans. But I was like, "Here's what you do. You don't let email be sent or people be on email outside of their working hours.
yeah,
That's that is like you don't let people chart outside of their working hours. And you create systems where if you
boundaries.
know that somebody has been working for an 8-hour shift, a 12-hour, and let's be honest, in healthcare, it's a 12-hour shift because you
Hmm.
work, like 4 10s or 3 12s for a lot of people in healthcare. You create intelligent systems that don't let people do work outside of work,
Right.
and you create environments of management that promote this idea of we don't do work outside of work. So as your manager, I'm not going to be checking up on emails at 6 in the morning if my shift doesn't start until my shift if my work day doesn't start until 9. And I'm not going to be expecting you to respond to me in 2 hours or 2 minutes. I'm going to give you the 24 hours that you need to thoughtfully respond. Create a culture that has breaks built in so that people do not feel the need to stay on the little hamster wheel of emails. And charting is another one that you mentioned. It charting in the medical industry is terrible because we don't support the time necessary to chart appropriately. And that charting is a really important part of patient care. We know this. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and they've started like when I was leaving, we were piloting a scribe program, which is okay, but the weird thing was is they put scribes on the lower performers instead of the higher performers. Actually use them to do more instead of rewarding the highest performers, they tried to raise up lower performers to a
well,
standard that were already having troubles closing their
the
charts.
reward for high performance is almost always more work.
Right.
It's never
Right.
more pay. It should be more pay and more time off, but it
Yeah.
is instead more work.
One of the first things I did when I got laid off was actually I do not receive any notifications on my phone whatsoever.
Right.
Because whenever I could remember, like, especially if I was on vacation and you start seeing that little email badge go like, oh crap, I got 27 unread emails. Half of them are probably from the fundraising foundation telling what's
Mm-hmm.
going on in Children's Miracle Network. But besides the point, the
What?
the
You worked at a pediatric in-network hospital, like in Children's Network Hospital? You didn't get 10,000 emails about that? Yeah, no, I get it.
yeah, it's just, I was like, and I can remember doing payroll at Disney. But I think there is a country toying with this idea of not allowing workers on email and whatnot after certain hours. But back to where we kind of started. What was it? So I can tell you at one point in time, I became depressed and I told my PCP, I said, I think I'm depressed. I'm not sleeping. I'm not this. I'm not that. Well, she goes, well, the first thing we got to do is we got to get you some sleep and then you can try this antidepressant. Because if you're not getting any sleep, then of course your mind is going to be off. So that
Sleep
was
is
kind
a
of the
form
first
of
solution.
medicine for a lot
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you, when you had that you said you had that conversation, you're like, I'm taking the leave of absence.
Yeah.
Was it something similar, and how did you figure out that sleep was kind of that key component, or did your PCP and best address sleep as kind of it, or did you have to go figure it out on your own?
Yeah, right? Like it was so many things all at once. I went to my doctor and said, well, I go to a very good primary care setting, and the primary care clinic that I go to, part of their routine care is every time that you go in, you fill out this, it's like one page, essentially mental health survey, right?
Hmm.
Mental wellness survey. And it really is, it's like the same 10 questions. And so there was actually a history of sorts to support when I went in and said, I think I'm depressed. They're like, yeah, we've been seeing this score get worse and worse
Oh, that's neat.
for you. And in fact, like the way you filled it out today, we absolutely would talk to you about depression now. So like it was interesting that it kind of came at the same point.
Mm.
And so I did have, so I had confirmation, like it wasn't just me, like it wasn't just inside my head. I had this sort of external confirmation. They had external confirmation, and they said, and my primary care physician said, I can absolutely prescribe you, an antidepressant. For me, it was Prozac, and that actually was the first one I tried, and it actually worked really well for me. But, she said, I really don't like my patients to be on these things without being in therapy. So let's talk about getting you therapy. They have a sort of stopgap emergency therapist on staff at the clinic. So I
Hmm.
was able to get an appointment with them, but they're not a regular, like
Right.
they're sort of between a clinician and a
It's
social
almost,
worker.
yeah, it's almost like a urgent care type of
Yeah. So
therapist in a way.
their main thing is like, let me make sure that you're not going to self-harm immediately. Like you're not
Right.
in
Let's
that
make sure
level
we
of
don't need to get you a
crisis.
spot somewhere.
Right. And then let's try to get you in with a therapist. The problem is in my area, my region, I don't know how it works everywhere else. I live in Washington State.
Hmm.
There are regulations where I can't see, like, no therapist outside of the state can see me. Like, we have to be in the same state to do therapy together. Like, we can do teletherapy, but we still have to be in the same state. I don't know why that's true. It seems dumb, but that is how the law is set up and the regulations are set up. So when she was first trying to find me a therapist, the only thing that she could recommend were in-person sessions. There wasn't even a telemedicine thing then. And then I tried to get with a therapist and they like I would get so far through the screening. And now trying to find yourself a therapist when you're in the throes of depression is like
Yeah.
it's a little too late. Like you already needed this thing and now you have this really big hurdle. There's just a lot of paperwork and a lot of like trying to find the right person and making sure you match. Anyway, I ultimately decided to use an app that was outside of network but that was affordable for me. They did a lot of that initial paperwork trying to figure out the matching through algorithms and me answering questions, kind of like a match.com, but for a therapist. And I was able to start therapy remotely. But that was within my budget. I mean, if I can't imagine what it would have been if I couldn't have afforded anything. If it
Yeah.
had to be in network, it would have been awful because
Actually,
I wouldn't have had care.
I listened to, man, some of the people in the pod. I don't remember if it was Hot Mess Espresso or Connection Over Perfection, but somebody interviewed a therapist from Washington State who is a military wife and but was explaining like reimbursement rates and why she can only see so many people and has to do cash pay because if they're charging you 180, by the time the provider gets their cut, it's like $75
Yep.
because somebody's taking this, somebody else is taking that, and you know, the insurance is probably really only going to reimburse like 120 of the 180, which is why a lot of people, if price point is a pain point, always ask for cash pricing because sometimes they will do that cash pricing. And I know we used to do it at the clinic. And when I got laid off, I didn't have insurance for 3 years and I would do cash pay because it was actually worth it. And if you're
Yeah.
moderately healthy and whatnot, but for therapy, and now we have better help and many different avenues that we can explore. But it is one of those things that I know when I did my graduate project in 2015 for Bastrop County outside of Austin where I lived, there's one therapist for like every 2,200 people. So
No,
finding
it's not
therapy
enough.
is very difficult, and telemedicine and BetterHelp and apps like that have really increased access for people. But yeah, it can be super difficult and it creates a lot of anxiety, and especially when you need it the most, when you're trying to
Yeah, I
find
went
that
through
person.
I probably went through two serious search processes that were unsuccessful and caused more depression before I used the app and was successful in finding someone. And that was probably over like a 2-year period. Like it was hard to even get back on the horse and try again. So I say that because it's a cautionary tale. If you can and do find someone that you vibe with and that you match with, like therapy is like a weekly 30-minute therapy session is really awesome, and I don't know why it's not just covered for all the entire population. Like everyone should be able to have access to that. It's
Right.
really good. But we don't have that. So anyway, I was able to see a therapist, and eventually the therapist was the one who was like, maybe you just need to take a break from work. So she recommended the leave of absence and got me thinking about that.
Mhm.
And then when I was on the leave of absence and had like a second to breathe and wasn't panicking constantly, which is we talked about sleep. I mean, I tried to do a bunch of other stuff. I was already on like medication for hypertension. I had so like at one point I wrote down on like a like college ruled piece of paper, and I had
Mhm.
2 columns worth of symptoms that were basically all related to in some way shape or form not sleeping enough.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the laundry list of things that were wrong with me, some of which I was taking medication for, some of which I was ignoring because it
Mhm.
wasn't worth even getting to yet.
Yeah, you got to break those
And
lists down and tackle them one at a time.
well, that's just it. I was looking at that list and realized I was kind of trying to figure out a prioritization for my healthcare, both mental and physical and like
Hmm.
overall wellness. And looking at the lists, I was like, well, is there any common denominator? And truly, sleep was the common denominator. And I was like, okay, so this insomnia thing that's sitting somewhere in the middle of this list that I've got here is actually the biggest piece because I could draw a line to almost every other thing on this list. My short temper, my inability to get anything done, my inattentiveness, like all of these
Yeah.
things were very my constant fatigue, my hypertension, like all of it was my high cholesterol, my not being able to exercise, my exercise, like everything was like all pointing to, all right, maybe if I had more sleep, it would be good. But how do I get that? And so that was when I started to just really help myself. I didn't work with anyone specifically on sleep, although there are some great sleep coaches. I now know that you can work with sleep coaches and they can do amazing things, and they probably can shorten the amount of time it takes you to get to where I got to. But yeah, I just came I had like sort of this eureka moment where I looked at that list and I was thinking about what can I do? How can I get out of this seemingly endless downward spiral? And the thing that stepped sort of was a neon light was sleep.
How'd you finally get it? Did you take some medication? Did you
Well,
take some edibles?
I was taking some I was taking pot gummies. So like for a while I was like, "Oh, my answer is pot gummies. I will just, I figured out my dosage, I figured out my amount, I figured out how many hours before I wanted to sleep I needed to take it." I was like, "This is great." And then I started taking the Prozac and suddenly the pot didn't work.
Yeah,
Like
isn't
not only
there
did it
an
not work,
enzyme or something that keeps you from processing your antidepressant correctly? I feel like I just heard a podcast or read an article or something of somebody explaining this, that The
Oh,
problem is with THC and antidepressants is
oh,
they can, one affects the ability to process the other, and therefore, if you become a constant
yeah.
THC
My lived
user,
experience was basically the antidepressant negated any benefit from the gummy. So I was like, yay, I don't feel like there's no point in life anymore. Like I can actually like see a reason to live. This is
right,
good. I need this medicine. This medicine is very important to me right now, but it is interfering with the only thing that I could figure out to let myself sleep. So I had to come up with something else. And so I tried a whole bunch of different things. I'll be honest with you, I never actually was very good about limiting screen time. It's a really good recommendation. I highly recommend it. I still recommend it to lots of people, but it's a hard one to actually do.
yeah.
Yeah. It it's really good to do, but it's really hard to do in this day and age. So I wasn't super good at that, but I did get better at creating a nighttime routine for myself, and like that was the prelude to sleep. So I kind of just created a routine that I did the same way and sort of had the same elements of every night, so that I had that anchoring. And then I tried different audio tools cuz I felt like as a kid my self-soothing methods were internal monologue,
Mm-hmm.
but with my anxiety as high as it was, my internal monologue was a downward spiral of doom. So I needed some sort of external monologue, I thought, or external sort of thing to get my brain could hold on to, that wasn't my own spiraling thoughts. And white noise didn't work. Music, sleep meditations would work for like 1 or 2 nights, but not consistently.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually I was like, I just want somebody to like soothingly count to me. That would be nice.
And you recorded it yourself?
Yeah. I looked for it first. I looked hard. I even looked on like language sites. I thought somebody must like English as a second language, right? Like somebody must have counted the numbers from 0 to 500 so that people knew how they progressed or what a
Right.
normal English speaker would do, but it wasn't there.
Hmm.
So I made it for myself. And there are like lists. Like there's one guy who does a really, I mean, it works for a lot of people. It's actually a more popular podcast than my podcast, but one of his like themes, I guess, like types of shows that he does is like he just lists anything, and it's really random stuff. Like it's not stuff that normally would work on a list together. But my brain was like, well, that's useless because none of that stuff makes sense together. And why are you putting these things together? And what were you thinking when you did this? So I had to curate lists that made sense to me in order to like help myself go to sleep. And yeah, I do listen to my own podcast to go to sleep, which is weird because it's my own voice, but I do sometimes listen to it to go to sleep.
I've found out that I've recently learned when my wife and daughter travel away from me and I stay
Yep.
behind, that I sleep with the TV on. And a lot of
Mm.
people would probably cringe with that. But then I had heard something that it's the reason I don't sleep, I have trouble sleeping is because my brain won't shut down. And that
Yep.
sometimes that secondary sound in the background gives your brain a little bit of release and relaxation because you're not really focusing on that. You're just kind of, it's in the
Yep.
background or something. And so now, my wife, she'll be like, you got to turn the TV off because I'll stay up later. But I
Yep.
find that if I maybe listen to a podcast or something on the way to sleep or an audiobook, that I'll wake up at some point in the middle of the night with earbuds falling out of my ear and stuff like that. But yeah, it's kind of helped me. But I didn't even know there were sleep podcasts or sleep
Yeah.
lists. I knew there were stuff like, my wife and I did work nights in the hospital setting for the first 6, 7 years.
Yeah, which is
And
terrible for your sleep and probably
yeah,
contributes to why you can't sleep now.
it was horrible. And
Yep.
learning that in the daytime, you use a sound machine. So I've
Yeah.
always been a fan of like ocean noise, and I know that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes Prime will have like black screens of for 9 to 11 hours of ocean waves or raining and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it took me working nights to even understand like, oh, like there are sound machines and eye masks and stuff like that, whatever it is to try to fix your sleep hygiene.
Yeah.
Now, did you use any like that, or was it a list? And when you went away from the gummies, like the THC edibles, did you try something else like Ollie or
I tried
Benadryl?
melatonin.
Yeah.
Melatonin was not helpful to me. And also melatonin is one that I knew going in that like you have to you can do it for so many weeks and then you do have to take like several days off for it to retain its
Mm-hmm.
effectiveness. The disordered sleep, one of the definitions of disordered sleep, one of the traits or characteristics that define disordered sleep is that if you require some sort of supplementation or medical sleep aid, you
Mm-hmm.
have disordered sleep. And
Mm-hmm.
so as I've learned more about sleep, I've moved away from things that are medical interventions unless it's an emergent situation. Like if you're in a sleep crisis and like you're or a medical, like when they first had that list of all the symptoms and everything, it's like I was in a crisis, I needed something. Like the gummies were great.
Right.
Like NyQuil, if that's the only thing you have in your medicine cabinet, like take it. Like do get some sleep, but eventually it's better for your sleep hygiene if you can self-soothe without any sort of intervention. A lot
Man.
of people use alcohol, and I used to think that alcohol made me fall asleep better, right? So like the whole idea of a nightcap, but the problem with that is that alcohol disrupts the cycles of your sleep. And so a lot of the medicine of sleep, the things that sleep does to help our bodies, is not as effective when we fall asleep using alcohol. So it's like a medical intervention. It's like a sleep aid. And so it's if you're relying on something like that for sleep, it's also considered disordered sleep.
Yeah, so I have like sometimes well, let me see. I won't say I won't fall asleep without anything, but I have periods where I can sleep maybe assisted with some sort of medical intervention where I might sleep like let's say maybe 6 to 8 hours on a regular basis.
Woohoo! Good job.
And then I go off and something might happen, or maybe it doesn't work, or sometimes I get this crazy idea in my head that I want to try to sleep with nothing, no interventions or anything. And when I do that, I find that my normal hours, I might sleep like 3 to 4 hours, 5 if I'm lucky, but
Yeah.
I will stay up easily 20 hours, no problem. And I kind of give myself this thing of, I guess if you get tired enough, you'll go to sleep and be up till 2 or 3 in the morning and
Sure.
then be up at 5:30. And
Yeah.
I could do that for days and days, but
Mm-hmm.
then at some
Or
point
a whole lifetime, honestly,
I
decades. Lots
might
of people do it for
crash.
decades. Yeah.
Sometimes but then, I'll take a day and I'll be like, man, I ended up taking a nap, or I felt like
Yep.
I slept all day, like my body crashed. And then I'm sitting there going, well, I guess if your body needs it, it needs it. Your body will tell you when it's tired. And kind of my question, is it better to have some assisted and have something constant and routine, or is it better to not have any assistance and just kind of go till you can't go, even if it's irregular? I mean, what if your regular is being irregular?
Yeah. And there are those folks. So, healthy sleep is when you can get 8 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period. A lot of people, especially today in our day and age with electronics and how light works, etc., we like to do that 8 hours all at once. That doesn't work for everyone. And it isn't necessarily how we've evolved. So prior to electricity, and electricity is really only a little blip on our evolutionary radar, and specifically artificial light, we did not sleep this way. Like we didn't sleep all in one chunk. And so there are many of us who, not many, but a percentage of us, in a normal curve kind of thing,
Hmm.
there's a percentile that doesn't really do well with concentrated sleep. And your personal circadian rhythms are better for like 2 4-hour sessions or maybe a 6 and a 2-hour session. So when you're evaluating what's best for you and whether or not you are actually one of those people who's outside of that normal cycle of being able to do all of your sleep concentrated, ask yourself, am I getting every 24 hours, am I getting 8 hours of sleep regularly? Like, is 1/3 of my life dedicated to sleep? And if the answer is no, there's probably disordered in some way, and so you can start thinking about it. To get to your question about supplementation or assisted, medical intervention,
Hmm.
medical assistance, one of the things is, okay, that's a great tool. Like, that is a tool in your toolbox. And what other tools are there? So you have to think about, like, I'm going to use this tool, but it's not the best thing. It's like an emergency tool. I'm going to use that, but I'm going to help it. I'm going to help it in one way or another, whatever works for me. But there are certain things that we can do. So whether that's, while I'm taking this supplement, I'm going to try really hard to keep the same bedtime. Or maybe the same bedtime is hard, but I'm going to wake up at the same time. So I'm going to start to make a schedule for myself so that I can tell my body to get used to some kind of a cycle. Because then my body can start making the melatonin that it needs. It can start adjusting all of the other hormone levels that it needs to be on that circadian rhythm, that 24-hour cycle where we take an 8-hour break every 24 hours and charge our batteries. So what I would say to anyone who's like, I love my sleep aids, like, and I would say, I get it. Like, they are life-saving. I'm not against them, but try to start pairing other things with it so that if for some reason your sleep aid wasn't available to you, you would still have some some things that you have control over that help you go to sleep, that help you shut your brain down. You mentioned that, like, you can't sleep because your
Hmm.
brain's going, and I think that's a lot of our issues. I am absolutely like that. I still have occasional bouts of insomnia where I'm just like, why aren't any of the tools in my toolbox working? Like,
Well, that's why
what
people
new
use
tools do I
alcohol.
need?
I
Yeah,
used to use alcohol because I mean that would be the thing that would shut me down,
yeah,
shut my brain down, and I could fall asleep. But then, of course, you're getting terrible sleep.
less good sleep, exactly.
Hmm.
So I had to do a mind shift too, right? Because I mentioned that I went to prep school and I was raised, and maybe it was just generationally, I'm not sure, but like, I'll sleep when I'm dead, right? Like, I
Yeah.
just want to go, go, go. It's great. I have really tried to shift my focus from sleep is what interrupts life to being more like, sleep is what I need to live my best life. So taking that pause is super important, and I want to do it. I want to do it, and it's good for me. So how can I make that possible with the brain and body that I have? So for me, that routine and really starting that routine. So I have a pretty consistent routine. That's my bedtime routine that starts pretty much after dinner and goes until like 10:30 when I go to sleep. And it's, we clean up the house, I go for a walk, we watch a little bit of TV, I go upstairs, I have an upstairs where my bedroom is. I go to my bedroom, and I have a routine in the bathroom that's like this, like, and we dim the lights. So even though
Hmm.
we're watching TV, like, we don't leave other lights on. I put on some music that's like my sleep soundtrack, like not my sleep soundtrack, but my like evening wind down
Yeah.
soundtrack. I don't listen to or watch news at night anymore. I plug my phone in next to my bed. I set my alarm before I get before I go to like wash my face and brush my teeth and do those things. I set my alarm, I get my music going, I do my little like personal hygiene routine, I take care of all of that. I maybe, if I'm feeling like, oh, I need a little bit more, I do a little meditation. If you're a religious person, that might mean that you say your prayers.
Right.
That might mean that you do some journaling. We try not to use our screens, right? So like, whatever it is that you need to do to like go through your day, wind down, and tell yourself that it's okay to actually go into sleep mode, versus
Mm.
a lot of us, I think, have a habit of pushing our day through, run, run, run. We're doing everything. Maybe we've got lots of information coming at us and no time to digest it, so that when we lay down in bed, all of a sudden our brains are like, oh, great. Now I can think about digesting all this stuff instead of going to sleep. And so I try to give myself a little bit of time to process the
Hmm.
evening or process the day, maybe plan for the next day, make sure that there's a walk through the house that I do to make sure that the doors are locked and the stove is off and all those things that wake you up in the middle of the night if you're not careful about it. Bills are blown out. So yeah, I say to anybody who's like, I need my medication or my alcohol or whatever to go to sleep, I say that's fine. Try to pair it with something that you have control over that isn't an external intervention. Try to pair it with, and maybe one or two things. Because for me, I need about an hour and a half before I can actually go to sleep. Like, I know, like, and it sucks because, like, that's an extra hour and a half of my day. That is not my time sleeping. That's not my time doing other stuff. But that's what I need to get the good sleep that makes the other hours as productive as possible.
Yeah. My thing, I know, you know, cannabis and THC help
Yep.
me to get off many medications. I
Yeah.
stopped taking anxiety and
Yeah.
antidepressants and sleep and muscle relaxers because I've had herniated discs in my neck and my back. And so, cannabis helped a lot.
Yeah. It's good
Especially
medicine.
with edibles and whatnot. So I'm definitely pro, but then there's also times like, hey, it's gonna be maybe the gummy didn't work or whatever. And I have like melatonin Ollie sleep gummies, which is sometimes
Yeah.
what I take. But like the other night, they didn't work. And I was like,
No.
I took them like on purpose to, like an hour before, and here I was 4 hours later. And then I'm like, well, I might have to take an edible, which
And
takes
that's
a
going
little
to
bit
take
of
two
time to,
hours to work.
yeah, exactly. And so, so I go back and forth. Sometimes I would go back and forth and it was like, well, because sometimes I don't want to take the edible and then I would be like, oh, I'll take an Ollie sleep gummy instead because it's more acceptable to some people. But,
Yeah. Well, and it's just
but
cheaper. Like, it's also less expensive.
yeah, but and the thing is it's just, I don't know. And that's how I get thrown off. And sometimes is if I'm not consistent
Yeah.
and I
There's
don't
so
know.
many things during our day, too. Like, so one of the things that I've noticed is that my brain is quieter if my body has been fully worked. And that is another thing that is really frustrating because that means that in addition to my 1 hour wind down routine, I now
Hmm.
have to figure out when I'm going to spend at least 20 to 30 minutes a day, like sweating.
Yeah.
When, when am I going to do my like workout? But if I wake up and do that workout, it actually makes my sleep better. So
I had a
I
late
recent,
workout the other day and I thought the late workout a later workout, might
yeah.
have disrupted my ability to go to bed, but I took the gummies and they just didn't work. But I was like, oh.
Well, and sometimes a late workout can, like, especially if your workout then produces endorphins and then those endorphins last for a long time, that can be a problem because those endorphins are like, yeah, let's do stuff. And you're like,
Let's
but no,
override the melatonin.
yes. Like, so it can be tough to balance it all out. And so, one thing is you just have to give yourself grace. Like, nobody ever got better sleep by being upset at how much they messed up their routine or like being mean to themselves or bullying themselves over not getting enough sleep. Like,
It's
no
not
one
going to
ever got
help.
better sleep that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it certainly, it doesn't help anything you
Nope.
do. So why would it help as it relates to sleep as
Yeah.
well?
So we have to give ourselves grace and give ourselves, a little bit of love and not be too upset at ourselves for whatever it is that we use or need to get through the day. One of the things that comforts me a lot is knowing that science has now proven that just closing your eyes, laying down, and trying to sleep, like just letting go and like letting your mind drift or whatever, even though sometimes it feels like it's going on a like downward spiral or whatever, that act has some of the benefits of sleep.
Hmm.
So it's not terrible if you're lying in bed with your eyes closed, like, and you're not sleeping. Sometimes, like, you get to that point where it's like 1:30, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you're like, oh my God, I haven't slept. I have to get up at 6. Is it even worth it? Should I be trying to do this? What is,
Yeah.
what's my best thing? Do I take the gummy and like get 1 hour sleep, but then be groggy for the, like, that's the other thing with the gummies is like,
Mm-hmm.
they last 8 hours, whether you're awake or not. So
Yeah.
there's that weird brain fog that happens. But anyway, so you're running through all these thoughts in your head. They're all happening at once. Your brain's firing like crazy, and you're trying to figure out if anything that you do is even worth it and why should you try. The good news is just being quiet and still, like letting all of your body relax, closing your eyes, resting your tongue, maybe doing like a full body scan of like head to toe, just trying to like relax every muscle. That option is beneficial. There is good work in that that is helping your body to set parts of the cycle. You can't get everything done, like it doesn't, but it helps to clear your brain. Like it starts to open up the ability of your body to clear out all of the waste products that your brain makes during the day, and allow you to not have as much brain fog. So there is some value in that pretending to sleep or
Mm-hmm.
trying to sleep. And I get a lot of comfort from that. Like that helped me let go of a lot of my sleep anxiety, just knowing that the effort has value
Yeah, because
to
I
my
think,
body.
what you said about, I was thinking about that sleep anxiety is that you get more. So many people are caught up in this cycle of they have so much going on. And then let's say you try to get to bed by 10:30, 11 because you've put your kids to bed. You got to get up at 5 or 6, whatever, get your kids
School bus
ready,
is
go,
coming when it's coming
all
and you
that.
can't stop it.
Yeah. And you take, maybe you take something or you lay down or you don't, and it doesn't work. Whatever you're doing doesn't work. And kind of like you said, it's 1, it's 2. Now I got to get up at 6. Now I'm only going to get this much sleep. And I can remember that when I was much younger. And, I used to actually face my old school alarm clock away from me. So I could never see the time. So I would never
Yeah.
wake up and go, oh, it's this time. I can only do that. I don't want to know what time it is. And I found
Yep.
that kind of helped me. But people, if you're have poor sleep hygiene, then you get that anxiety about not sleeping well because you don't sleep well. And then every day you're like, man, all I want to do is get off work so I can go to sleep because I'm so tired. And then
Right.
you're like, oh man, but what if I don't sleep? Or,
Yeah.
there's these windows, you're tired, and if you don't sleep when you're tired, you miss that window and then you're up. I have that issue a lot as
Because
well.
that's your circadian rhythm. Yeah. So all of that, I think that a lot of us, our whole society hasn't really necessarily been very helpful about helping us get good sleep. And so it's okay. Like we can have bad days and bad nights. There's going to be bad nights. One of the things that I try to remind people is just because you had a bad night doesn't mean the next one's going to be bad. You don't have to overanalyze it either. Sometimes you can be like, "Oh, it was this, it was this, it was this, it was this." Like, was it the gummy that I took? Was it the fact that I
Yeah.
had a drink? Was it the fact that I exercised late? Was that bad? Like I thought that was going to be good. Like, you don't have to overanalyze it. You do have to be like, "Well, that was last night. It's done, and now I get to try again." Like, what? Like, let me just put something else into play. Like maybe I can, try a different soundtrack. Maybe that'll do it. Maybe I can, maybe that workout that was like a super pumped up workout wasn't good, but maybe a yoga workout would work. Like there's lots
Yeah.
of evening yoga that's like great for you, and that helps you get some of that moving meditation that lets your mind calm down. And then just practicing letting go like of those thoughts of questioning yourself. So if you're questioning what you're doing and you're sort of like that anxiety around, am I maximizing this? Is it good enough? Does it, does it matter? Should I try? All of those kinds of questions. If you just replace them with like some thoughts that are like, it's okay. It's good. I'm trying and that's my best now. There'll be a better day. I will be a better version of myself and a worse version of myself in the future, and I'm just who I can be now. some of that self-acceptance and radical self-acceptance practice can really help alleviate that like anxiety about sleep. Sometimes you can't change the anxiety about your day, but at least you can like be like, all right, I'm going to try, and this is my best effort for these 8 hours. I was listening to one sleep expert, and he was saying that, he was really good scientific, lecture essentially, or interview about the values and benefits of sleep. And then he was asked, so how do you sleep? Like, do you get enough sleep? And he's like, oh God, no, I'm terrible at it.
Just real quick, after you're done listening to this amazing episode on this pretty freaking sweet podcast, give it a 5-star rating, and then head on over to the Podcast Connection Network and check out all the other amazing podcasts that we got over there. This is a plug. I got one too. It's called The Nonchalant Perfectionist. Check us all out. The link, you know where the link's going to be in the episode's description.
And I was like, okay, we are all flawed humans.
Yeah.
and it's okay that even this person who's literally whose research has literally shown him that losing sleep is killing him, and he knows that every night. He knows that like not getting enough sleep is taking years off of his life, and he's still terrible at sleep. I'm not necessarily ever going to be the best at this.
Did you ever
That's
try wearing,
okay.
did you ever wear a Whoop band or like one of the Kiora rings that track your
I use
sleep?
my phone, but I haven't I haven't done a wearables yet. I also have a very smart bed. I have a bed that tells me like my breaths and my restlessness
Mm-hmm.
and like me getting up and stuff. So my bed does a lot of that stuff for me in terms of the sleep area. Like I have a whole app that I can look at that can tell me how terribly I slept and
Do you think
how
that's
restless I
beneficial?
was.
Because I want to get a Whoop and start tracking it because
Yeah.
I want to see if there's a way to go like, not create anxiety, but to go like, hey, if my rest score was X, then what did my day look like? And were there things in my day that possibly caused my rest score to be that? And if it's
Yeah.
better, then, because I think with their app, it uses kind of like there's an output, a rest score. So everything you do throughout the day, how much you're exerting and whatnot, but then how well you're recovering.
Yeah.
Um,
Um It depends on the type of person you are. So, like, I'm a person who doesn't want to accept anything less than 90%, right? So, like, anything less than an A isn't really a good grade in my book, which is a terrible mentality because A's don't come all the time. And also, sleep is hard. And so, my bed gives me a sleep score, and it's rarely above 75. And so I sometimes have a really hard time. I'm like, but dude, I slept like I've been doing so good. I got my 8 hours in. It was in like relatively normal sleep time. But like if you wake up to use the restroom, it cuts you off. If it like a good night's sleep, it's really hard to get a perfect score one night, let alone average a perfect
yeah,
score, right? So I had to let go of my desires to always have 100% and use it to more like
tool.
track like to help me stay on target. Like am I actually getting like I'm leaving my window open for 8 hours of sleep, but am I actually getting 8 hours of restful sleep? So like I found it helpful if I wanted to make some tweaks, but I didn't necessarily find it helpful at the beginning to look at because my sleep was so bad, my scores were so low, I was already failing so much that having a numeric evaluation of that didn't help my mental health.
Yeah, I could see that.
Like, so I think it's cool to have the data if you use it wisely and evaluate it realistically. I think if your expectations
Hmm.
of yourself are that you will, now that you have this metric, suddenly, not even suddenly, but just want to be at 90% or above, the tools have too many variables for the average human to ever do that. And when you start to look at the scoring, like look into each app's data, like their metadata, they usually will tell you what their average, like what the averages are across their users. So you can start to see what you can expect from yourself without saying that you have to get 100%.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like I definitely think you can see where you're at and you can
Yeah.
try some things and then always look at the data. It's kind of like tracking podcast analytics. I mean, you
Yep.
don't want to do it every day. Sometimes you can't
Well,
help yourself, but at the same time, if it's something that's going to give you anxiety, it's like you need to know what it is because you need to know where you are and where
yep.
you want to get to. But you don't want to create more anxiety around it by necessarily becoming obsessed with it.
And if you're a person who is highly sensitive to like electromagnetic fields that can sometimes interrupt sleep, like if you're the type of person who like has suddenly gotten good sleep when like you've gone on a camping trip and like you can't charge your phone and you're like in the middle of nowhere, and even though you're sleeping on like hard rocky ground, you
Mm-hmm.
suddenly feel like you're sleeping better, maybe adding another device that's monitoring you and putting out an electric field might not be the best thing for you. So like just know your own sensitivities. It's really good to I just did I do a monthly live stream with a sleep expert, and she and I talk about things that are, fun for, or different themes around things to think about for your own sleep hygiene. And our one that we recorded yesterday was about the environment that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So like just setting your own room up well, like the clothes that you're wearing, the materials that you put on your bed. We don't think a lot about that stuff, especially when we're in crisis mode with sleep and we're just trying to like get 4 hours of sleep. We don't necessarily think about like how the materials around us are, or whether the chaos and mess around us are affecting your sleep. But those things do have a factor. And so sometimes if you know, can slowly, just one little thing at a time, one little change every couple of weeks, get yourself to a place where you have a better environment for sleep and you're trying different tools and seeing how they work. And sometimes you know right away, but sometimes it takes a couple weeks to know if a tool is really going to work. So I just always say little increments, try little things, and the more tools you can put in your toolbox, the better. So try silk pajamas. Maybe they're like your amazing, like the thing that you need. And they're, if you're spending $100 on silk pajamas, that's a big spend on pajamas, but also $100 on like your sleep and a pair of pajamas that'll last you 10 years. Maybe it's totally worth it.
So do you have a statistic on how how bad sleep impacts the years of your life?
So that researcher that I was listening to, it was pretty astounding. More recently, they've said that sleeping well, starting in your midlife even, can extend your life, especially for men, up to 5 years. So like any other like even with other health concerns, mitigating for, heart and all the other major killers or whatever. So you can add 5, 7 years onto your life, basically, if you sleep well. For me, that's nice. Like, I existentially, I like, yeah, I want to live longer, but practically on the day to day, I live better sleeping well. And the more I focus, the more I think about every 24 hours trying to get that 8 hours of sleep, and how much better that makes the other 2/3 of my day, right? Like how much
Yeah.
better that is for my family. Like, I mean, yeah, being part of a family unit and having insomnia and having that lead to, and like the burnout and the stress and the anxiety, the depression, the hypertension, the fatigue, the brain fog, like I was so not a good presence for them. I wasn't a good person. Like I mean, it was better than not being in their life. They absolutely wanted me there. But my daughter the other day, she's 13. And so 13-year-olds don't have enormous filters. Like they will just say what's on their mind. And she's like, yeah, I've noticed you're a lot less cranky. It's like, yep,
But
not wrong.
it's crazy because what you said, like it's I never really thought of it in reverse, kind of going, hey, if I spend the time on this 1/3 of my life, the other 2/3 is going to be better. Using your sleep to judge, I'm just going to have a better day, guaranteed. And I go to this type A bit when I don't sleep and I get up at like, sometimes I would have this thing where I would go to bed. I thought I was going to bed early because it was 10 o'clock, but then I'd get up at like 2:30 or 3. And
Mm-hmm.
come in and edit. And then I'm like, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, then I get tired or more tired later in the day. But then I'm like, like you say, it's like, oh, well, what constitutes a better day? Making these 2/3 of your waking hours better, and I go, well, I got much more done because I didn't sleep. And then you start to equate that, even though you see
It's
it's
your
kind of
secret weapon.
it is, but then it's not necessarily great for
It's
you.
self-destructive. That's the problem.
Yeah,
Like it's
yeah.
a secret weapon, but it's self-destructive. It's not sustainable. I don't know. I had to do a lot of napping too. Like that was another thing in my early recovery
Hmm.
from burnout was I just stopped pushing through anything. Like the second I felt like I needed to sleep, I didn't like the second I felt tired, I was like,
Hmm.
okay, I guess it's time for a nap. And what I noticed with that is that over the period of about 6 months, what triggered me realizing I was tired was actually earlier and earlier in the process of fatigue. Like I was getting better and better at listening to my body and my brain tell me that so I used to be like, yeah, I'll fall like when I fall asleep, that's must have been when I was really tired. So like if I can stay up, then I'm not tired. That turned out to not be true. So then I was like, okay, well, if I'm keeping myself up with like external stimulants, like a screen or something like that, then I must be tired. And then slowly but surely, what I've noticed is that like my brain will actually tell me I'm tired. Like my body starts, the first signs of being tired is like I rub my eyes. And like I rubbed my eyes all day long for years.
Now you know.
And I had no idea. I was like, oh, I must have dry eyes.
Right.
Nah, dude, that's actually tiredness.
Hmm.
Like that's actually your body screaming out, trying to get you to go to sleep, not really knowing how to do it. So it's a lot of little steps, but napping can be really important in that. If you have the type of day that you can take naps, or you can schedule a leave of absence from work where you can allow yourself to nap and just get to the point where you're getting, let's say 7, not even 8, let's just say 7 hours of sleep
Yeah.
in every 24-hour period, because it adds up so fast. If you're only getting, if you're getting 6 hours of sleep, you're like, I'm doing awesome with 6 hours of sleep, but your body actually needs 8. That's 2 times 7, so 14 hours less of sleep that like sleep deficit that you're accumulating every week. And you're like, oh, 14 hours is long. It doesn't take long for that to suddenly over a 2-week period become more than 24 hours. Like you can't sleep a whole day. That's not possible.
No.
So trying to
Yeah.
just little by little inch up the amount of sleep and the consistency of it. So like I find that as my insomnia progresses, my bed tells me that my circadian rhythms are like later and later. Like it's starting to tell me like, oh, the best time for you to go to sleep is 2 a.m. And I'm like, I don't think that's true.
So
Like
can your
you're in the
rhythm
right.
shift like that?
It can. Yeah, you can.
I know I had a week where I was waking up like most days. I'm usually a very early riser, but then
Yeah.
there were some days I was sleeping till 9 or 9:20, but it was like consistent for like maybe 5 or 6 days.
Yeah.
And then somewhere in there, I had another one of these weird offset things, and then I was back to up at 5 a.m. like
Yep.
normal.
Yeah, and it can shift. It usually takes more than a week, but if that felt good, like if it felt good for you to be like, oh yeah, like midnight to 9 a.m. is a pretty like, or 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. is like I feel good. That might be your body's optimum for right now. And if you
Right.
want to shift that because maybe you need to get the kids off to school by 7 a.m., you need to shift that or whatever it is, you have early morning meetings, doing it by like half an hour or 15 minutes every couple of days before, like, so it's probably not like that, like doing it gradually is better overall than being like, okay, it's the last day of summer. We have to wake up at 7 a.m. tomorrow, or we have to wake up at 5 a.m. tomorrow, even though we've been sleeping until 9 o'clock. Like, try to shift that window as slowly as you can. The most that we can really tolerate is about an hour shift total. And that's not really true because we all have had terrible times with daylight
Mm-hmm.
savings.
Yeah. I heard somebody on a podcast the other day say 15 minutes you probably won't miss. So
Yeah.
if you want to wake up earlier, start with 15 minutes and then scale it back another 15 to equal 30,
Mm-hmm.
but you're really only doing 15 at a time.
Yeah.
Because he's like, you're probably not going to miss it. It's not going to have that big of a detriment to whatever it is you're trying to do.
Yeah.
But what, I was thinking, like, I mean, other than kind of the obvious, why is sleep so important?
Oh gosh. Yeah. So it makes us feel better, but one of the things that's really important that happens during sleep is we do a lot of bodily maintenance during sleep. So diabetics and people with hypertension will tell you that if they don't sleep well, their numbers are elevated when they wake up. And that's because your body hasn't been able to do all of its normal maintenance. So you are doing listen work like for all of your systems all at once. Like you're doing all of this really good stuff in the course of a 90-minute sleep cycle, right? And you have several of those throughout the night. And the different parts of the sleep cycle do different work. So, a part where you're having dreams, that's really good for your mental health. It helps you do this really magical thing where you separate the emotions of your experiences from the facts of your experiences, and you can help you reduce trauma, impact of trauma, and it can also help you process and hold on to and create more of all of those joyful moments in your day. So like good and bad, so for your mental health. And that's what our dreams do. Fun weird little fact is that if you want to dream more and remember your dreams, sleep in like 15 minutes. Like set your
Oh,
alarm 15 minutes later. The dream cycles are kind of the end of your sleeping, and so you'll remember your dreams better if you just wake up about 15 minutes later than normal, if you have a normal cycle. So get a normal cycle first and then try to have fun enjoying your dreams. But anyway, that's the beyond the funness of remembering your dreams and being able to analyze them. You're also doing this really important work for your mental health of categorizing and organizing all of the information that you took in during the day and separating the emotions from the facts of that information. So for your mental health, it's super important to get that sleep and to have your brain be able to do that. For your system's health, so kind of all of your vitals, right? Like they take your temperature when you go to the doctor, they look at your weight, they take your temperature, they take your blood pressure. Sleep helps with all those things.
yep.
You lose weight, like you can lose weight and help you metabolize better during sleep. All the mitochondria in your cells, which are the powerhouse of your cells, but you could also think of them as the energy users. They both they create the energy for your body, but it takes energy to do that, and they work best and do all of their fusion and fission and all the things that they need to do to optimize. That happens during sleep. So that's the basis of your metabolic state, your mitochondria, which support that in every one of your little cells. That all happens during sleep. And then there's the fact that you are able to, your cognition improves. So mental health is one thing, physical health is another, and then there's cognition. So like your IQ or your intelligence improves. So those three categories of big buckets of things that we think about for optimizing your wellness and your performance and your output in life, all three of them are benefited during sleep. And to get the same kinds of benefits as you do from regular sleep would require an enormous cocktail of many different drugs that would probably have bad interactions with each other.
Very
So,
true.
if you can get sleep, you can avoid a lot of pharmaceuticals. We now know that there's now a lot of research that sort of into Alzheimer's that has shown that Alzheimer's is almost like a category 3 of diabetes. So there's early life diabetes that happens as type 1. There's late onset, like later in life onset diabetes, that's type 2. They're now understanding that Alzheimer's can be a progression of that as well. And all of that is just how well your body is metabolizing and working effectively, all of which is improved via sleep. So you can improve a lot of things that are annoying or negative in your life by getting a little more sleep.
Yeah, it's
It's
man,
hard.
we just do not we have not set up the world to make it successful. I know when I went in the military at 17 and probably once a week or once every 2 weeks you're standing watch, so you're probably going to be up for 24 hours
Mm-hmm.
or more,
Yeah.
and those kinds of things, I mean, there's so much and we put so much pressure on ourselves and so much to do and the hours we work and whatnot. It's
It
very difficult.
frustrates me that the military does that because it's their own research into sleep deprivation that they know that it takes 2 weeks of preparation to manage 20 like to manage and still have peak performance at 20 hours of awakeness. So like
Mm.
they know they shouldn't be putting soldiers through that.
Yeah, that was my thing was I graduated high school a year early and joined the Navy and my my sleep I'm pretty sure I had sleep issues before that. I just don't
Mhm.
remember,
Yeah.
but I definitely know they were exacerbated by that. But
Were you on
I
a ship? Were you deployed on
yeah.
a ship? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, ships are terrible. They run
Yeah.
24 hours. They're horrible.
7 days a week.
Yep.
So yeah, that was kind of the beginning of it. But then I know there was a period in my life when I got out of the military and I worked in restaurants and worked nights and kind of had this natural rhythm of, maybe sleeping somewhere between 4 and 6 in the morning till noon or
Mhm.
1, and then go to work at 4 p.m. or something. That
That's
was
not
very good for
terrible.
me.
I mean, that's not terrible. That's great. And some people really are night owls. There aren't enough night owls in the world to cover all the night shifts we need, but some
Hmm.
people really are night owls. And if it works for you and you're getting like the key is it doesn't matter how many interruptions you have so much as if you're getting those 8 hours of sleep, 7 to 8 hours of sleep in your 24-hour period, then you can say it's good sleep and you can say that you don't have a sleep issue, even if you're getting those 7 or 8 hours between midnight and whether you're getting it between midnight and 8 a.m. or between 6 a.m. and 2 in the afternoon. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I can usually tell with me is I stay pretty consistent with a wake up time. I rarely use an alarm clock.
Yep.
Usually I have to go to the bathroom in the morning at some point, and that's like that wakes me up. That's my
Yep.
internal alarm clock. And so it has been those days where sometimes you're like, you go to bed at 2:30 and you get up at 5:30 because that's when my body said, hey, it's time to get up and go use the restroom. So you need to go. And that might be one of those days where hey, I slept 3 hours and that was kind of natural, and then there was some time
Yeah.
we went on a vacation and I was sleeping till 9:30 a lot, and sometimes I was taking naps and sometimes I was during the day, but I had had a bunch of those 3 and 4 hour nights of sleep kind of packed on before we left.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I slept a lot when, it was a relaxing getaway. So it wasn't like an event
Yes.
type. So it was nice.
Yep.
And there wasn't really any internet or TV out there. That helped.
Bliss. Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
usually how I can tell if I'm on or off and, not using an alarm clock. But of course, my issue is just shutting it all down but, now that I've kind of learned, hey, a podcast will help me go to sleep
Yep.
when I can no longer watch TV because I need to get better at reducing the screen time as well.
Yeah, do you have any of the like if you're using a phone, are you using a phone mostly or is it like TVs and like laptops and computers that is your screen
It's
time?
usually the iMac. Usually I'm working in
Yeah.
here, but I've been trying to be very cognizant of if my wife gets home later, like, hey, if I edit all day or something, I stop. But then
Yeah.
we watch TV because
Yeah.
we
Because it's
enjoy
awesome.
it.
Yeah.
And and then it's usually she'll fall asleep and I'll continue watching TV and then I'll be like, it's getting kind of late. I better turn it off. And then sometimes I'll come in here in the podcasting area and watch TV, read, go on the phone or something till I get tired enough to actually fall asleep. But sometimes I fall asleep in here watching TV.
Yeah.
I'll lay down on the
So your
floor.
body's gone to its limit and it's like, I gotta stop now.
But then it's also that I think I fall asleep easier with something, whether it's a podcast or the TV on. It's because I'm kind of listening to it and that's
Yep.
taking my mind off my own thoughts.
Yep.
Um,
Any other voice besides my own in my head, man, that's like, it was, yeah, especially when the depression and anxiety were at their worst, like just any other voice. And so I get that. If you can have it be as few senses as possible, so like it's just auditory, right? So like if it's a podcast, you're just
mhm.
listening to it. It's
Because
really
the other
helpful.
one's emitting the light. That's the problem with the TV.
Yeah, that's exactly. The light is the really big issue with screens. And so you can also do some things to set your screens so that they're a little bit dimmer, or you
Hmm.
can put a filter on larger screens to kind of reduce that blue light.
Yeah,
The
I
science
do
on
red
blue
lights
light
as
is
well.
iffy. Like the science on how on if blocking the blue light helps is pretty iffy. The science on shutting off your screens is very, very clear.
What about
It's the
what about
hardest thing to do, but
what
it's
about
very
red
clear.
lights? Like I use red lights in here at night. I kind of go military like blue during the day, but I actually do yellow when I'm
Oh,
working because I feel some of the classrooms I was in the military said that yellow, like that kind of pastel yellow is good for learning. That's why they are that
oh, that's
color.
cool. I
You
haven't
know,
heard about that.
maybe somewhere between mustard and pastel, or a pastel
Yeah.
mustard, I guess Dijon.
A little bit
But
of a, yeah, like a light color. Oh, that's neat. I haven't heard of that. I do know that there's good science about just low lights. So like
okay.
if the sun's going down, lower the amount of light, like the artificial light that you're creating, and that you have, that can help signal melatonin production. So if your artificial light is as bright as daylight, essentially, your body doesn't make as much melatonin, so you don't know to go to sleep, blah, blah, blah. So if you reduce the light, and I know that some people have been really successful if they like to set up their whole home on, like if they've got a smart home kind of,
Yeah.
they just they can program their lights to dim not even at a specific time, but like based on when the sunset is in their area. Like they've got a program set up to do that, and I think that's super cool. I am not that tech savvy, so like I just walk around the house and like we have dimmers in our main area, so we do
Mm-hmm.
dim the lights as the sun is going down or as we want to try to get better sleep. Like after dinner basically we start dimming the lights.
So, did you ever go back to corporate, or have you now dedicated your life to helping others get better sleep?
No, I haven't gone back to a sort of standard job. I do voice acting and I speak about sleep. So I speak about sleep, I do my podcast, and then I pay to do voice acting.
And make sure you tell everyone the name of your podcast.
Yeah, it's Sleep Lists. So it starts and it ends with an S, sleeplists.com, or on any podcast provider platform. It's just Sleep Lists. And there's 3 seasons out of pure lists, and season 4 is coming out. I'm working on recording those episodes and some episodes that have some tips and tricks and stuff in it too. So for
So,
waking and sleeping hours.
oh,
Yeah.
nice. So, I like to ask people. This kind of started off as a something that was giving you trouble, but you've embarked on this journey.
Yeah.
You're now doing something totally different. What is one thing that's been great that's happened to you as a result of this kind of negative journey in the process that you've gone through and been on? Something you never would have expected in a million years happened to you, but it's pretty awesome, and it's because this happened to you.
Yeah, I really have gotten to explore and continue to get to explore who I am and what I want to do on my own terms. So much of my life was dedicated to fulfilling goals for other people's agendas that it has been exceptionally awesome to just serve my own agenda and to make my own priorities, a focal point of my existence instead of the afterthought of my existence. That's been, I mean, I don't know that it was like the amount of time that I've been able to spend with my daughter and parenting and getting to know her and being connected to her and not feeling rushed in those moments and not feeling like, yeah, that has been so valuable. And even I feel like a lot of parents take off the first like 4 or 5 years of their kid's life. Middle school has been a really good time for me to have had more time with my daughter. And I think it's a more critical developmental period that I can have more impact on. Like
Yeah.
for babies, there's a lot of things that we know we have to do for them, but daycare does a pretty decent job for this, like how to focus her coming of age, like how for her to like, so that has
You
been
want the rest
unexpected.
of
I
the
mean,
world raising your daughter in that critical
yeah,
time.
like I did not know. I mean, for the longest time, I felt like my work made me a better mom, especially of a younger, like
Hmm.
early developmental kid. But I really think that having had this break from the corporate world and this movement towards living my own priorities has made me an exceptionally good tween and teen mom and has been so nice for our family, in part because I'm just more available as a full human person to the people that depend on me in my life. So,
Yeah, I
yeah,
can
it's
see
been
that. It's
amazing.
been kind of similar for me in that, you grow up and I was good in school and had scholarships to places, and then you're expected to kind of take that route and do those
Yep.
things because your parents were born in the 50s, or and they're products of parents who were in world wars and depressions, and there's all these expectations, and then you come to find out that it's all kind of and I got laid off, and it's been the biggest blessing because it's allowed me. I thought I would be in corporate America and be at a level when my daughter went to college. I could work remotely, be wherever she needed me to be. But
Yeah.
getting laid off, I realized, look, the time is now for me to
Mm-hmm.
be able to be there for her now. And she's 10 going into the fifth grade. But, being able to attend all the school functions, being able to pick her up, being able to stay home with her when she's sick, take her to the doctor, and not having to worry about who's calling in, who's got PTO to use, who's got this and who's got that, and is it going to cause a write up because my daughter is sick again
Right.
or something like
Yeah.
that. And so yeah, and I think what happens is you come into the truest version of yourself,
Yeah.
and you're happier, more fulfilled, and you feel like you're being true to your core versus maybe what was expected of you growing up. And you're much more a better participant, like you said, to those around you and those who depend on you.
Yeah, it's sustainable. Like I'm not making as much money. Like hands
Agreed.
down, we don't have as much money, but
But
it
you have
is
time
time, and time is money. Time is a
and
resource that's
presence,
valuable, and
presence.
presence. And just knowing that like I can keep doing this. Like this is sustainable. It's hard sometimes. Like I was really sick
Right.
for about a month a while ago, and I'm just like recovering from it, and it was like, oh, that sucked. But it was also like the whole world didn't fall apart either. I couldn't have been that sick. Like I would have had to take short-term disability leave to
Right.
manage what I was doing before. And it's like I don't have to worry about that. And I can focus on myself and my health and my kid and our family and our friends and the relationships that we want around us. And so I spend more time with people and things that I like and value and appreciate that bring value to me. And I'm a lot better at saying no to stuff that does not bring me any value. Like that I don't, yeah, I'm a lot better at saying no than I ever was during, like, I'm a lot less busy, but I'm also a lot better at doing the things that I want to do and just saying, no, I don't have to do all of these other things that society or other people expect of me. I can just do what I want to do
Hmm.
and carve a life out of that, which is really nice.
Yeah, you kind of learn to set your own boundaries versus
Yeah.
the boundaries that society tries to give us, which are sometimes no boundaries, like um, you know, They kind of want you to do everything but name your
for
firstborn.
them. Like that's
Yeah,
for other people. And I guess that's the difference. Like what I do now, I do for myself, and I do it to help people. Like I hope that anyone listening to this podcast is listening and thinking, gosh, I can improve my life by just helping my sleep. And I want to get that message out and to help people have that aha moment of enjoying the value that sleep offers them, right? And that it can be a really good part of a healthy and productive lifestyle. And whether you're in corporate and you want to stay there forever, like more power to you.
right.
The like capitalism in the
We
world
need those
runs on
people.
you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's whatever lifestyle you're living, to have it be sustainable, you have to be able to get a good night's sleep, or at least get the sleep that helps your body stay healthy
Well,
and
kind of like you said,
well.
if you can take care of that 1/3, then you're 2/3 out there making sure that the world runs as it should, you know?
Yeah, and that you're just like that you're better. Like I don't know, I spent so many days, weeks, months like fighting through brain fog. I didn't even realize that I was fighting through brain fog. And now I'm like, oh, yeah, no.
Well,
I
you're
can
not as
tell when I'm
productive.
yeah, I
You
can tell
don't,
when
you
I'm
don't,
good.
yeah, yeah. And and that's kind of one of those things too. I think that, I did an interview with a gentleman over alcohol and how alcohol can impact corporations' bottom lines, because if people drink and they're hungover and they don't perform as well, well, what about sleep?
Mm-hmm.
If your crew, your team, your organization, if people running it aren't getting the proper rest, you can be at work for 8 hours and get absolutely nothing done because you only
Yes.
slept 2 hours the night before and you're tired, and you can look
And
busy and get the bare minimum done, but
or just look like you're getting there done. I mean, we
yeah.
know how bad alcohol is for driving, right? Like we know that we're not
Hmm.
supposed to drive when we're inebriated. It turns out that if your
Sleep.
sleep deficit is more than 2 hours, it's like driving drunk. It's just as bad. And
Yeah.
everyone on the road is doing that already.
Oh, not only that, the scary part is, and this is a thing from, is how much first year interns work.
Oh
And when
my
I worked in a
gosh.
teaching hospital, and it's like, okay, you got surgery residents who've been up X amount of hours, which is essentially like having, 3 beers or 6 beers or whatever it is while they're operating on you because they're so sleep deprived. And it's like, but flying planes, truck
Mm-hmm.
drivers, all
Pilots,
these,
truck
they
drivers.
have sleep requirements. They're only
Mm-hmm.
allowed, rest has to be built into their amount of operational time, if
Yeah.
you will. But we don't do that to medical doctors, to interns. It's almost like a rite of passage, like expected because everybody else did it. Like
Oh,
versus
it's
going like, could we produce better doctors if interns and residents got more sleep?
oh, we absolutely could. Absolutely we could. It like and why? I don't understand why the introduction when you're like one of the things that sleep is really good for is to help you learn. Like you can't learn actually if you're sleep deprived. And so the idea that when they're doing the most intense amount of their learning that we're sleep depriving them, that's a flaw in our healthcare system that we have the science to prove is a bad idea, and that we just need the willpower to create a better and more sustainable system so that we don't burn out all like
Better
how many
rested, better
interns
tested.
and residents burn out, and
Mhm.
you've spent all that money and all of that time in the system training them, and then they're not doing their job function because they've left and they're like, no, I'm going to live a whole different lifestyle because I can't handle it.
Yeah, it is. It's wild that they give
It's
out the
why we have a
advice
shortage of providers.
and contradict their own advice.
Yeah. I did a
Uh,
lot of fundraising for hospitals and healthcare. So I worked at both a Highline Community Hospital out here that is now part of the Franciscan Network, and I worked at Seattle Children's Hospital for many years. And yeah, some of the stuff that we do in healthcare is the most unhealthy stuff.
yeah, it is.
And it doesn't make sense to me at all.
The system's broken and needs a little shift, and that's kind of part of the reason, it's hard to make a difference in the way it's structured.
Yes. it
The way the
is.
government payments, they want to pay X, a small percentage, not even full rate, and this and that, the other, and it's hard. It's always short
Yeah,
staffed. Insurance companies don't want to pay, the government don't. Everybody wants rules, and to me, just with a master's in healthcare administration, it's like we have we're what one of the richest nations with some of the top brains, minds, inventions, technology, but we don't live the longest.
no. And I mean, lots of other countries have known for a long time that we work too many hours, but it is in healthcare a really weird system. I mean,
Yeah,
that does not help.
yeah.
Yeah, I wish that I know so many former doctors, and it's really hard now being like as a Gen Xer. We know all these people who have. I know it's normal to go through multiple careers in your life, especially
Mm-hmm.
with how long we live, but there's such a high level of investment in a medical career, especially a doctor's career. Know
Almost
some of the
trapped.
people that have abandoned that, yet they're trapped, and then like it's so bad that even though they're all those systems are in place to trap them there, they still want out.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And they still leave because that's not a sustainable lifestyle, and it wasn't possible for them to realize their goals with that for their lives, even though that's supposed to be a lucrative and rewarding career. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, the healthcare system is one that, I mean, if you have a master's in healthcare administration, you know it super well. I feel like more people need to have masters in healthcare administration and systems change so that more people like there needs to be like a combined, like more of a combined degree so that people learn how to not just do incremental improvements but to disrupt whole systems and build better, more sustainable systems.
Yeah, and the problem with that is, it's going to take multiple parties to do
Oh
that. It's going
yeah.
to take the government, the insurance companies, or the government if they had any authority to mandate it enough. But, then
I'm really
I don't know that we want
interested.
the government like running that, but
Yeah, no, there's pros and cons, right? Like this, like like socialized medicine is great, and I sort of want it, but I see that every country that has socialized medicine has problems with their system too. So like I know
right.
it's not the perfect system. I don't know that a perfect
It's
system
somewhere in
exists,
between.
but yeah.
It's somewhere in
Well,
between the money and the socialism, good heart
yeah.
type of
Well, and
type inclusion,
yeah,
everyone.
then the goodness is like the benefit to society, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
really ideally I am really interested to see some of the private practices that have gone into private pay only, right? So like this idea that you have a cluster of however many hundred sort of primary care patients and that they
Mm-hmm.
pay in regularly to the system but then they have unlimited access to the clinic. I'm really interested to see if that trend, that thing that I'm seeing start in some places, if it takes off as a trend for primary care, because that could in fact lead the way to a government pay system that actually makes sense. That because then the government could just be like, oh, for every patient we pay this much money and we get unlimited access to care. Like they could actually know what the right amount is to pay because these entrepreneurs are trying to figure it out in the
Yeah,
private sector. So
very
I,
good
I
idea.
find that really interesting and hopeful for primary care. Hospital systems are a whole nother matter, but for primary care, I find that really hopeful. And all of it needs more mental health support. So like we all the systems from like
Yeah.
we started this conversation out saying that like it would be great if everyone had access to a therapist for 30 minutes a week. Like
Well,
a
no,
lot could change in the world.
it's a hard part because I know, I mean, even, I manage primary care and urgent care and different things. And if one of the organizations that manages mental health and prescriptions related to that, like shuts down or a patient goes in crisis and they need their medicine and then they come to us and then we can't give them except this much and there's not enough stopgaps, communication, different things in between to really, uh, to do it
Well,
well.
it's a system that has no redundancies. Like redundancies are sometimes inefficiencies, but they're important in human systems so that we can manage surges. And in an attempt to get at efficiency, we have systems now that have zero redundancies, and so that means it's unsustainable. People are unable to get the care that they need, and so that's really sad.
Access,
Yeah.
availability. There's,
Or
man,
we have over access, like in well-to-do areas, there's like, an urgent care on every corner, and then like
yeah. I'm seeing more urgent
in
cares pop up.
yeah. Oh, and they pop up in places that are high income zip codes versus lower income zip codes are forced to use the ER and overtax that system, and yeah. Blah.
Yeah, or some sort of community care
Yeah.
plan that is harder to gain access to for appointments. It's
Yes.
yeah.
And then they're taking 2 or 3 buses to get there. Yeah, so it's really hard. I mean, that's one of the things about lower resourced areas. They need more flexibility, and unfortunately they have less flexibility because their
Yeah.
jobs are less flexible, so they need more flexibility in other parts of their lives to get to appointments, and they can't. So ugh. And our whole system needs to be more flexible for personal care and health care. I mean, like you said, being worried about being written up because your daughter's sick again, like that idea is loathsome to me. I just get so angry at the idea that doing the best thing to raise our next generation is punitively handled in in corporate society, right? And so, or in corporate America. So yeah, to be able to say, no, this is good for everybody. We all want our children to do well and be cared for, and so let's make it so that adults can do that, so we can have a better place for them to inherit. That'd be cool.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of those things of we gotta focus on well-being over profits for a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people still profit, but how much do you need to profit? Kind of like big pharma and stuff, like how much
Yeah.
is too much? Like what's enough? What could be, how much profit could you do without to actually better care of your people? But also would,
Yeah.
if you just and took a little off that and invested it in the people, be it through time and this and that, the other, you're going to get the profit back because they're going to be happier, more productive, drink more of your Kool-Aid, if you
Yeah.
will. But, you know, but then how about just make better Kool-Aid, you know?
Right. I mean, your
It shouldn't
Kool-Aid
have
shouldn't
to
have
be
to come with
either
a
or.
dose of poison, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like
exactly. Yeah,
that's the whole Jonestown reference, right? Is that it was poisoned Kool-Aid, and like your Kool-Aid shouldn't come with poison. It should just be like a nice refreshing beverage. Like
that's
let's do
right.
that.
Would you have any questions for me before you hop off? You can ask me
There
anything you want.
wow. Yeah, what do I want to ask you? If you could fix one thing about your sleep or have a solution, like what's the one thing about your sleep personally that you would really want to have a solution for?
Not not having to take anything to sleep, which would maybe I wish I didn't have to take anything and I could kind of go to bed and still keep a routine or a similar time, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Because if I automatically have this thing in my head, okay, if I fail to take Ollie gummies or THC gummies, I'm probably going to be up till 2 or 3 in the morning. And therefore, maybe I edit my actions and my behaviors around that. Maybe I come into the office more because I know my wife and daughter are going to go to bed earlier. And I'm going to just go ahead and edit because I know I'm going to be up till 2 in the morning. So that, I don't know. I don't know if I should, I'm going to lay down at 10 every night regardless and maybe turn on sleepless and try that. And I guess if it,
Try it. Also, give yourself the grace to be like, you know what? Instead of being up until 2 in the morning, I'm going to shut everything off at 1:30. I'm going to try to cut it off at 1:30. Like just move it up half an hour or even just 15 minutes, right? 1:45. Shut it down. And so give yourself the grace to do it a little bit more slowly, but you'll get there. You'll get there. And as you start to find the solutions that work for you, that you can then supplement if you need a little bit of additional assistance, you'll
Mhm.
start to find for your own body what works best throughout your weeks.
So if I lay down at 10,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna try this,
Yeah.
and this is a great question for listeners of who have sleep issues. What's an appropriate amount of time to sit still, be there, whatever? Because you've heard some of these things of if you lay down to go to sleep and you don't fall asleep within 45 minutes, then get up and do something else till you're tired or read a book or whatever. What's the appropriate amount of time to before you abandon that
Your
plan?
effort.
Yeah,
Yeah.
your effort. Better. I like that.
Before you abandon your effort. So you've set your sleep window for your 8 hours, right? So let's say
Mm-hmm.
we're 10:30 to 6:30 a.m. We lay down to sleep at 10:30 and we've we've done our 10 to 10:30 like pre-bed routine, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
even before 10:30, when you lay down at 10 o'clock, you're gonna start shutting off screens and quieting yourself down, giving yourself the best effort, the best chance for your 15-minute initial effort to work. So if you get to bed, put your head on the pillow, 10:30, and you're not asleep by 10:45 or 11 o'clock at the latest, you're gonna say, all right, I'm gonna wake up. I'm gonna get out of bed. You're not woken up because you've been asleep. I'm gonna get out of bed. I'm going to not turn on screens. That's the number one thing. You're not gonna turn on screens. You're gonna go read a book, do a like personal meditation. So if you have to turn on your screens just to get the meditation going, but do like a getting to sleep meditation. There's lots of those. Try them out. Lots of different apps. Or I'm going to journal. Like I've got so much going on in my head right now. I'm going to actually write it down and put it out. And I'm going to spend no more than half an hour on that non-sleep effort. So now we're at 11:30 night at the latest. I'm going to go back to bed and try again for another 15 minutes to half an hour. So you're not abandoning ship for the whole night
Right.
or until 2 in the morning, right? You're like, okay, it's not working right now. That's cool. I'm going to try a few things that might work that I know that are not screens that will maybe help me out, whether it's meditation, journaling, or reading. Try one of
I
those
do
three
all three.
things. Or, yeah. And then set a little timer for them, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey Siri, set a timer for half an hour so that you go, okay, I've kind of completed this cycle. Now I've given myself a little bit more, maybe melatonin, maybe like I've helped my brain just sort of figure out it's time to sleep again. I'm going to go back and try now and try for 15 minutes. And I would say repeat that because those efforts of trying are still valuable. Remember, like laying down is still getting you partway there to all the
Mm-hmm.
benefits of sleep. So you're gonna and you're gonna repeat that so that you're not associating the bed with anything negative, right? That's what you're trying to do with that. You're trying to keep the bed associated with positive thoughts. It's sex and sleep. Yes, that's what I want in bed. and and not anxiety, depression, and existential dread. Like those are
Yeah.
not good things to have in bed. So
Nope.
you want the positive stuff in bed, not the negative stuff. So that's what you're gonna do. And my sleep lists last between 15 and 45 minutes usually. A couple of them are a little bit longer, but that's a great thing to be like if you've got that going. And I don't even do them in headphones. Like just a little speaker on the side of your
Mm-hmm.
bed is good, just so you can hear. It's low voice. There's like a little bit of a sound, like background noise
Relaxing.
music to it. Yeah, if you're not asleep after like listening to like one or two of those and you're like, this isn't doing it for me, you just get out of bed and you do one of those three things. You're either reading, journaling, or meditating / doing prayers.
I'm excited. I'm
Yeah.
excited to try because I keep my office is attached to the bedroom. So if I
Yeah.
can't, I can actually just walk in here,
Mm-hmm.
journal, which I do often and daily,
Yeah.
and read. Because when I'm editing, in between editing, I do like the Pomodoro technique where I sit down
Oh,
for
cool.
25 minutes and then I
Yeah.
take a 5-minute break. So for every 25 minutes, I'm reading 5 minutes of a book just to do something different, not look at a
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah. Yeah. If
So yeah.
you couple that, like the Pomodoro method is awesome. If you do 5 minutes of reading and 5 minutes of large muscle exercise, so like squats, lunges, a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
like marching in place, if you want to like do your pull-ups, whatever, you got a door frame pull-up machine, whatever you got, and you do that consistently through your work period, that will help you get better sleep as well. And it helps improve your metabolism for preventing diabetes or fighting pre-diabetes and hypertension.
Cool. I actually have these foam dice that have exercises on them from Five Below that you just throw down and it'll say like
Yeah.
push-ups, it'll give the amount of reps
Yeah.
and whatever. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So like just take 10 take 10 minutes during your Pomodoro instead of 5.
Yeah.
You'll end up being more productive during the Pomodoro.
Sweet. Sweet.
Yeah.
Well,
And you'll get better sleep.
thank you for coming on. I learned a lot and I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much
Seems
for
we have a
having
lot in
me.
common.
I really appreciate
And you're the second
being
voice person I know. I know one from TikTok who was one of the first people I met. So
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity in voiceover work. There's also a lot of scare that artificial intelligence is going to take over our jobs, so who knows?
but you know, hey, it allows you, him, and I do what I do, and it allows us the freedom to, I think, try to be the parents and partners that we want to be and kind of
And
get to
live a
do it on our own.
sustainable life.
Yeah.
At this point for me it's like I want to live a life where I am not burning my candle at both ends, and
Yeah.
so that has to be my priority.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I
Thank you.
will
I really
yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you, listeners, for hanging in there with us, and I hope you all get a really good night's sleep.
Awesome. I'll email you with the info when it's going to be released and whatnot, and I'll see you on the other side.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye. Well, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. Remember, go out and be the person that you want to meet.
Asteroid of fear.